Lewis Hamilton and Ferrari, a story in Formula One marked by difficulties. 1/3 of the 2025 championship is already behind us, and unfortunately, the arrival of the English driver in Maranello has not produced any magical effect, due to a technical regression compared to the great progress made last season. Even the Monaco weekend was extremely disappointing for the 7-time Formula One world champion, who was ruthlessly outperformed by Charles Leclerc on home turf. Lewis Hamilton's discomfort is made evident by the team radio messages, which reveal major issues in adapting to the new technical and human environment. The Anglo-Caribbean driver is a subtle communicator, and his messages are subliminal for those who can grasp their meaning. To best face what is likely the final chapter of a stellar career, Lewis Hamilton has tried to build his comfort zone. He did this by bringing trusted people with him, such as his longtime personal assistant from Mercedes, Angela Cullen. It is no secret that the 7-time Formula One world champion wanted to continue his partnership with Peter Bonington, the veteran race engineer from his long tenure in Brackley. A collaboration that could not continue in red for various reasons. After 12 years of great success, the paths of Lewis Hamilton and Peter Bonington, one of the most iconic pairs in Formula One history, therefore came to an end. Although there was much talk in recent months about the possible arrival of the Briton at Maranello, Peter Bonington ultimately decided to stay with Mercedes, with Kimi Antonelli beginning his adventure at Brackley alongside one of the most highly regarded race engineers. Before the start of the 2025 Formula One campaign, Lewis Hamilton expressed that he was really happy for Bono and that he only wanted him to do what was best for him. He explained that at this point in Bono's life, he needed to make the best decision for himself and his family. Lewis Hamilton added that this change didn't really affect their relationship, although they would no longer be working side by side every day, which would be sad for both. Nevertheless, he emphasized that they would always remain part of each other's lives, describing Bono as his brother. The British driver then rolled up his sleeves, trying to settle into the Maranello environment as quickly as possible. He put in maximum effort, trying to show that fear of change was not in his nature. However, the signs of discomfort are now too evident to ignore, both with Riccardo Adami and more generally. Beyond the beating taken from Charles Leclerc, Lewis Hamilton's Monaco Grand Prix weekend was definitively compromised by a fatal misunderstanding during the first part of the qualifying session on Saturday. The impeding incident in Q1 involving Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen occurred because Riccardo Adami had informed him that the Red Bull driver had slowed down behind him, when in fact he was on a flying lap. The resulting 3-place grid penalty dropped him from 4th to 7th on the grid for the start of the Monaco Grand Prix. A terrible blow also in terms of Ferrari's overall race strategy, reducing the tactical options available to the team in red to outmaneuver the superb McLaren on a track where it is impossible to overtake. In the race, although car number 44 gained 2 positions and finished 5th, the communications between Lewis Hamilton and Riccardo Adami were once again far from smooth. In fact, the correct term would be almost surreal. At the end of the race, the British driver explained that he had not understood what he was fighting for, only gaining a clear picture of the situation after reviewing the data post-race. The water poured on the flames by Ferrari team principal Vasseur in the usual post-race interviews further confirms a worrying disconnect between the communication expected by the driver and that provided by the team. The feeling is that the Ferrari pit wall lacks an authoritative figure to oversee the work of the 2 race engineers, someone like Ross Brawn, to give another example, ready to intervene decisively when communication issues risk seriously compromising the team's overall result, and capable of immediately shutting down embarrassing episodes broadcast worldwide. Another sore point is Lewis Hamilton's ongoing complaints about the braking system, described as a real lottery during the Made in Italy and Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix, in other words, at the Imola circuit. A source of frustration that forced Brembo, through its communications manager Daniele Bettini, to clarify matters via Formula One's Italian broadcaster. The switch from the carbon industry's braking system used at Mercedes to Brembo components, the historic partner of Scuderia Ferrari, is proving very difficult for Lewis Hamilton. The English Ferrari driver has repeatedly highlighted the challenge of understanding its behavior due to the unpredictability of the brakes from one set to another, a factor that is becoming a constant throughout the 2025 Formula One season. The Italian company, through its communications head, explained that Brembo is working closely with the Maranello team to try to meet the needs of the historic team. However, Daniele Bettini's appearance live on Sky Sport F1 seemed like a necessary move, a kind of protection of the image of one of Italy's greatest motorsport excellences, namely Brembo. At the end of the 2025 Monaco Grand Prix, Ferrari team principal Frédéric Vasseur commented to the media on the Maranello team's performance and some key moments of the Monaco weekend, particularly the radio exchange involving Lewis Hamilton and his race engineer Riccardo Adami. During the final stages of the race, microphones picked up a seemingly tense moment between Lewis Hamilton and Riccardo Adami. The seven-time Formula One world champion, surprised by his engineer's lack of response, asked over the radio, "Are you upset with me?" but did not receive an immediate reply. Read more here about the analysis of team radios during the race. When asked about the incident, Frédéric Vasseur clarified bluntly that when a driver requests something between Turn 1 and Turn 3, the team must wait before responding to avoid distracting him. The former Alfa Romeo team principal pointed out that they were not inattentive or careless on the pit wall, but had simply agreed in advance to avoid communications in that section. The Ferrari team principal also dismissed any notion of tension, stating that there was no problem between Lewis Hamilton and Riccardo Adami. The French manager described the situation as merely a moment of pressure during the race, which was supposedly resolved shortly afterward. After a weekend of harmony in Imola, Monte Carlo seemed like a step backward in the relationship between the seven-time Formula One world champion and his new race engineer on the Ferrari pit wall. On Saturday, the team radio between Riccardo Adami and Lewis Hamilton in Q1 resulted in a three-place grid penalty that compromised the British driver's chances of fighting for a podium finish. On Sunday, a lack of clear communication frustrated Lewis Hamilton as he was engaged in one of the toughest races of the season. While Charles Leclerc secured a P2 and at least tried to show himself in Lando Norris's mirrors, especially with Max Verstappen leading and trying to block the McLaren MCL39 car, the other Ferrari SF25 of Lewis Hamilton ran a race of its own. The seven-time world champion was initially stuck behind Isaac Hadjar and Fernando Alonso, but after their pit stops, he was able to push and complete an overcut to take fifth place. However, the Briton's race on the streets of Monte Carlo unfortunately ended at that moment, with his SF25 single-seater having neither the pace to catch the top four nor the risk of losing fifth. And Lewis Hamilton himself admitted he understood little of what happened over the 78 laps last Sunday, as the Ferrari driver admitted that he could not explain the gap, noting that finishing 51 seconds behind race winner Lando Norris was difficult to accept.